Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you would like to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our channel on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live on Thursday. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
I am okay, David. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. You know, we're 2 for 2 years in terms of like the first Badger basketball game starting like almost at the exact same time as the podcast.
Yes. So don't ruin it for me.
No, I'm just, remember last year we had you could hear the cheering outside of the studio, and it's like, is that good cheering? Is it bad?
What's bad cheering?
Well, like because you just kind of hear the Peanuts like parents out there. You're just like, is that a good wah-wah or a bad wah-wah?
Yes. Hopefully it's good this year.
Anna, how you doing this week?
Fine. Definitely less concerned about missing the game because I would have missed it anyway.
I think I stand by that you have the best name for a bracket of all time. Just the not going to watch a game. I like it.
Just trying to be straightforward about that fact. But I'm playing the bracket, but that's as far as this goes. And
it's just going to hurt that much more when your bracket's still beating. It's just like, yep, I'm losing to not watching a game.
Yep, I did win one year, actually, and just like the least informed person in the room. So
I think it works. All right, well, before we get started, we have a word from our new sponsor. Reimagine what your data can do with Kaufman Rossin. By turning your information into insights. Your data holds endless possibilities, but only if you know how to unlock them. By turning raw information into actionable strategies, you can uncover opportunities, tackle challenges, and move your business forward. With Kaufman Rossin as your partner, clarity replaces complexity, giving you the insights you need to shape a smarter, brighter future. Learn more about our digital transformation services at kaufmanrossin.com/transform. Check out that link. It's in the body copy right now and in our live chats. It's a unique link, so it's important to click this one and not just think about this for a little bit and then Google it. Real important to click that URL, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
Get it. All right, our first story this week. China's BYD launches EV charging system, says it works nearly as fast as a fill-up. Chinese EV giant BYD this week announced its ultra-fast EV charging system. The company says it's almost as quick as filling up your gas at the pump. BYD says these flash chargers can provide a full charge for its latest EVs in 5 to 8 minutes. And the company plans to build 4,000 new charging stations across China. BYD says these 1 megawatt flash chargers can provide power for nearly 250 miles in 5 minutes. However, ultra-high voltage and a large current are required to maximize charging speeds. BYD's top-of-the-line model sells for just $40,000. It also makes the $12,000 Seagull in China. BYD wants to, quote, completely solve users' anxiety over charging. Anna, does 5 to 8 minute charging do that?
I think so, because obviously you mentioned the currents, and this is really more of a play towards infrastructure, right? This is not the kind of charger you'd have in your garage. Mm-hmm. So to put it more on par with the time it takes to fill up a gas tank is, I think, really compelling. Mm-hmm. I think the charging implications are pretty big. They come at a time when there's been some, I think, big advancements in terms of how much faster charging is getting in general. So Mercedes, for example, they recently said that their newest sedan that's set to come out next year has a 500-mile range, and then you can charge that in 10 minutes. I know. But the difference is with BYD, or I think that's how you say it, BYD, but maybe
whenever I look it up, it's BYD. And it was the one I looked at today was a man in front of the headquarters about to interview him. So that's why I confidently said BYD.
And he said, okay,
Yeah.
So with BYD, that speed of charging comes with affordability, right? The Mercedes, you certainly can't say that. But I think some of the other implications outside of just charging have to do with that. For example, BYD and Tesla have really been jockeying for position in terms of global leadership, especially in China, specifically just in the last few months, kind of trading places. But a few things have happened just recently with those two. This charging development was announced. Tesla sales plummeted in China as well. And then also BYD has announced that its autonomous technology, is a feature that they will provide for free going forward. And if you look at the comparison to Tesla there, Tesla sells a lot of vehicles in China. They charge $9,000 for full self-driving. So you have to decide if that's worth it to you, right? First month's free. I just want to say that.
The first month's free?
Yeah. But another company, Zeekr, which is owned by Geely, said it would also offer its self-driving for free as well. So if autonomous features are becoming devalued, and this is a big area of growth for Tesla, that's a problem, right? And if BYD has better charging infrastructure than Tesla, that's another problem. Analysts have been saying this for a while, that China is really catching up to the point where it's already starting to surpass some automakers when it comes to cost and capabilities that had a head start to them globally. The founder of BYD came from a battery company, so I don't think that this was too hard to predict that they were going to bring it when it came to batteries and charging capabilities. So it's just another challenge, I think, for Tesla to overcome in that market, which is the fastest growing market for EVs. So I think the charging component of it, yes, is very interesting, very exciting for EV users, but the broader implications in terms of that competitive market are really interesting.
Tesla was already facing some shifting market factors. Didn't need to go piling on its own. Creating more problems for itself. Talking a little bit about the technology. So these chargers rely on silicon carbide power chips with voltage levels up to 1,500 volts that BYD developed on its own. It was called the Blade, I believe, the lithium ion phosphate battery. Perhaps the world's safest and most efficient EV battery. You're talking about Tesla's technology. I mean, Tesla's using this in some of its EVs. So, Jeff, one thing that stuck out to me about this story was the charging time, right? According to the American Petroleum Institute, the average fill-up takes, you want to guess how long?
No clue.
2 minutes.
Okay.
So I would say it was a rather generous comparison to 5 to 8.
That too
Fair.
much? Too much for you?
Well, I do. No, I think like, sometimes you're just sitting there and you're like, how empty was that tank? I've been here a minute. And then when I think of quadrupling that, it's a long time. It's not crazy. Don't get me wrong. I know.
If 5 minutes is too long for you, then maybe you don't want an EV, really.
We're talking about the first world of the first world problems here.
You never go in and get like a bag of pretzels or go to the bathroom?
I go in and get the bag of pretzels almost every time.
But I mean, you think they'd let you, because you're like, when you're filling up with gas, you're not supposed to leave your vehicle to do that.
Right.
So you think they'd let you do that with a EV?
Yeah, they do that already. I mean, when you charge an EV and it locks in there, and people routinely go inside. That's why they have those at Walmart and stuff. They go inside and shop and
just hang out for 5 to 8 minutes.
You can't take it out unless you unlock it. There's no risk of fire like you have with gasoline. So yeah.
Okay. Mean, that changes things for me. I'm just saying.
Maybe you would do the 5 minutes then.
2 minutes. 2 minutes isn't 8 minutes. All
right.
Well, just don't wait till you're all the way down on the charge either.
Oh, completely agree. Pre-plan. Get ahead of things. That's me.
Yep. Well, I think what's interesting to me here, there's a couple different dynamics. First of all, when we're looking at this much voltage flowing through these chargers, there's a whole different set of connection technologies that need to be in place. You need to be able to make sure that you can actually hook up to the grid at a level that's going to be able to supply enough power for these chargers. We've already talked about the pressure that just EVs in general, for the U.S. anyway, is going to put on the grid, okay? China is also, I wouldn't say they're in an energy crisis, but they have a lot of the same challenges that we do as well in terms of trying to get away away from fossil fuels and trying to support growing grid, growing energy usage. So there are some things that we'll need to figure out for these types of fast chargers to make sure that they're safe and that they can actually provide the power that they say they can. So it's not just sort of a plug-and-play situation. There is some stuff to figure out. What I also think is interesting is right now, even though they're looking, it feels primarily at the Chinese market, which is a huge one, number one EV market in the world, all of that. When it comes to expanding and growing this part of their business, yes, there's Europe, but potentially they're missing out on the second biggest market in the world with the U.S. Right now, for BYD to bring their vehicles to the U.S., the tariffs are going to be huge. It's not going to be a competitive situation for them. So what I kind of wonder in looking at this story is what's the bigger opportunity for them? I guess as it relates specifically to the U.S. market, is it the charger or is it the charging technology that they can license to somebody else? Mm-hmm. And who is that going to be? If they're competing with Tesla so strongly in China and they see them as their number one competitor, chances are that's not who they're going to want to work with. So is this an opportunity for a Ford, a GM, a Stellantis, whomever, to try to license this technology and bring it over here for their EVs? It would give them a huge competitive advantage. Do they spread it around? They give it to everybody or what the dynamic is? It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out from that perspective as well outside of China.
Mm-hmm. What if Tesla partnered with them? I mean, because they've already got everyone to buy in on their the chargers, the actual hardware behind it.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting then if BYD says not in China though. We'll license it to you in the U.S. or Europe or whatever the case is. But it'll be interesting to see how they protect this. If this is as far ahead as it feels like it is than everybody else, how will they leverage that going forward?
Well, and don't you think part of that was part of the announcement? It was kind of like a warning, just like, hey, as long as everything is great with the grid and the power that's available to us, it's 5 to 8 minutes, right? It was kind of just like, and we plan on making 4,000 of these. So
yeah, well, I think the other thing that was kind of interesting too, sorry to cut you off, but like all the extra measures they took from a cooling perspective, keeping the battery cool within the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that's another technology that I think a lot of people, especially Tesla, might be really interested in as well.
No, either way, I mean, and I'm not saying I won't do 8 minutes, Anna, but I'm just like, I think I find this type of technology almost as exciting, if not more exciting than the extended ranges that we see, just because this has been sort of the one of the toughest cookies to crack since, and it seems like it's getting really close.
Yeah.
All right, our next most popular story this week: SPS Technologies laying off half its workforce after fire. In February, a fire broke out at SPS Technologies in Pennsylvania. The factory provided nearly 15% of the aerospace industry's fasteners. Well, things have gone from bad to worse as SPS is looking to lay off about 250 employees, nearly half the workforce. SPS's parent company, Precision Cast Parts, which is owned by Berkshire Hathaway, made the decision. In a letter to Berkshire Hathaway chairman and CEO Warren Buffett, Montgomery County's Board of Commissions chairman asked for additional investment to cover expanded severance packages. The fire took several days to put out, and it looks like the fallout is still happening. According to Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg, the plane manufacturer depended on this SPS location for numerous parts for its 787 and 737 jets. SPS also supplied fasteners for Black Hawk helicopters, F-15 fighter jets, and other military aircraft. Jeff, employees are going to receive 4 weeks' pay, but the average SPS employee has spent 25 years with the company, and that is just a hard way to end your tenure with an employer.
Yeah, I think I think this is a developing story. There's still a lot we need to figure out here. And I think because there are so many unknowns, that's probably what led to this decision. Yeah. Really not understanding what's going to go on, what's going to happen next. I believe that the plant is open in some capacity right now, just in a very limited way in terms of what they're actually able to do, which probably explains some of the supply chain issues that were also referenced in the stories from some pretty big suppliers. So, I mean, we still need to figure out what was the cause of the fire? What are some of the long-term environmental impacts of this physical location here? There's some lawsuits pending from different people in the area. And then we got just the long-term viability of the location in general. So, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. And I think sometimes leadership, to preserve what you have, makes some pretty drastic moves when we don't know. Yeah. We see that in a lot of instances right now. A real lack of clarity in terms of what's going to happen next can lead to people making some dramatic decisions.
Yeah.
foreshadow. So I think that's obviously what's going on here. It's going to be interesting how this has sort of a trickle-down effect as well throughout the aviation and military markets in terms of finding new suppliers. That may also be contributing to why this decision was made. I think one thing that COVID taught us is you need to diversify your supply chain. Maybe they had backup plans already in place and they're shifting around a little bit to handle some of those fluctuations, which leaves SPS in a very difficult situation. You feel for all these folks, but you have seen some things like job fairs being established. There is a lot of warning time that comes with the WARN perspective of the statement or whatever you want to call that. So, yeah, tough situation all the way around, but it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to develop and what we learn.
Well, and also a reminder that to not just make sure you're reinforce your supply chain, but also go and see those suppliers and kind of see what the facilities look like. I don't want to say like Tinderbox, but it sounds like, it was a fairly old facility and things went from bad to worse as a result of, how quickly it could have gone up. Anna, when you were looking at this story, based on how critical this component is, were you surprised that they kind of scaled back their workforce already?
I agree with what Jeff said, generally speaking, that I think that probably they are in a holding pattern and they have to figure out what they're doing, but they don't have a need for, 250 workers at this time. So laying off half to me says maybe it's too soon to answer a lot of those questions, but maybe it's a good sign that it was only half, because to me that suggests that if it were an open and shut case of like, we're done here, then you would not have seen that. You would have seen that entire operation shut down.
Yeah.
They said that what has remained now is a shell of a building that's vacant. I'm assuming that's one piece of the larger property. I think it's very likely, based on how bad the fire was, that they're going to have to relocate. However, I do think it's prudent that this county commissioner is pushing for a better severance package that's a little bit longer term, temporary pay for these employees, because if the operation can be relocated, I would think that you would want to do it in that same area because you would have proximity to that talent base that's been there for so long. If the average employee's been there 25 years, then if you can retain some of the goodwill there and you can retain the proximity to those workers, then, you should. But 4 weeks of severance does not do that. So hopefully that's the objective there, is to try to maybe extend some of these workers a lifeline to get them to hang on a little bit while they figure out what their next step is. I don't know.
Well, and according to Reuters, it looks like the entire industry is still scrambling. So just a couple of things that I pulled from this report. GE Aerospace is trying to figure out who can replace the factory's lost production and find anyone that has spare parts. Boeing and Safran in France asked their suppliers about the potential fallout. These SPS products include titanium fasteners like the ones that are used to assemble carbon fiber jets like the 787 we mentioned, as well as the Airbus A350. Some of these fasteners are so highly specialized that it's not like they can just be sourced to other manufacturers. Boeing sent a letter to suppliers asking if they regularly use these fasteners and to explain the impacts that not having these fasteners would be if it meant like not shipping parts that were ordered or not shipping other things that were ordered. Two executives at other fastener companies told Reuters that they are being bombarded by requests after this fire. And the one company, Bombardier, did say that they can source from elsewhere. But again, these are not commodity fasteners. So it could take years for another factory to even achieve the qualifications required to produce them. But, I mean, we saw how some things from a regulatory perspective could maybe sometimes get trimmed a little bit in the event of an emergency. I mean, we saw that after the hurricane with the IV bags. I don't know, but it definitely seems like it's another story where it's like, yeah, they're fasteners. And, people think of that as a commodity part. But, you really got to make sure you got a plan B.
Yeah, not always.
Yeah, like no one in the industry has a plan B. All right, our next most popular story. Canadian manufacturer closes plant, moves production to North Carolina. Canadian furniture maker Prepack Manufacturing is shutting down a plant in Delta, British Columbia, and moving those operations to the U.S. Production is shifting to a facility in North Carolina. The president of Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union, says that Prepack used uncertainty over trade in North America to make the move. After all, the company did cite, quote, an altered economic environment in its decision. However, Prepack officials said the decision long predated new concerns over tariffs, and the new location is simply closer to its customer base. Prepack opened the Delta factory in 2005. In 2019, the company was acquired by a private equity firm, and the North Carolina plant was opened in 2021. Some 170 jobs will be lost. The union called for a boycott of the company's products nationwide, joining ongoing protests of U.S.-made products both in Canada and abroad. Jeff, do you think there's any way this has a direct line to tariffs?
It could. I mean, who knows?
But I mean, like a decision like this is not just like all of a sudden they heard about tariffs and they're like, nope, got to make a move now.
Well, it's not unprecedented. Yeah. There was another Canadian furniture manufacturer, South Shore, who about a month ago basically said, we're cutting 115 jobs because of tariffs.
Oh, okay.
Now, could they be using tariffs the other way to basically justify cost-cutting measures? Sure.
Oh, they're not moving the jobs. They're just cutting.
They're cutting them.
Okay.
So there is some precedence there, which is probably why the union jumped all over it when they saw this decision, which on paper makes total sense. And it's so interesting because 6 months ago, if we ran this story and said a Canadian furniture manufacturer is moving operations to North Carolina, everybody would have been like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Of course they want to manufacture in the U.S. It's better here. Especially North Carolina. Textiles makes all the sense in the world. But now there's all this political dialogue behind it for something that, again, on paper makes a ton of sense when you're looking to consolidate operations, move closer to your customer base, all of those things. So do we know exactly? Of course not. But we will long term. We're going to see more and more of these situations, people either justifying decisions on the tariffs or using tariffs to justify decisions they had to make, or trying to basically say, no, for real, it was just business.
Yeah.
It didn't have anything to do with it. We aren't going to know. And part of that goes along with the fact that whether you're for or against all of these tariffs, the biggest thing that is needed right now is clarity. Mm-hmm. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Okay? Because it doesn't just affect materials that we're used to talking about. It's businesses, it's jobs here. Now this company's moving these jobs here, and there's going to be people here in the North Carolina community who are like, are we happy about this?
Yeah.
Do we know why this is happening? How do we really feel about these jobs coming in? And how is this company going to feel? Because we have seen the Canadians get very passionate about these boycotts. Mm-hmm. What does this mean for this company up there?
Yeah.
So there's just so many factors involved in here that we don't have questions to or don't have answers to, because we lack that clear direction.
Yeah.
That's what's so frustrating.
Well, I mean, you might have an answer to it today, but that might not be the same answer tomorrow.
100%.
Anna, there has been, it seems like there has been more action in Canadian manufacturing in the last month than we have reported on in the last 2 years combined. And a lot of that has to be with the evolving situation with this trade war.
Potentially it just makes a better headline when you see it now, and people maybe didn't care as much before.
Yeah.
And I hate to agree with Jeff on 2 stories in a row, but I will. Yeah, I agree. I think it's very unclear if this is tariff related, but these situations seem to be just stoking the fire of sentiment that's taking place. I read an interesting article in the Toronto Star about the trade war impacts on the Canadian steel industry. And they talked about how Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie had laid off 20 workers in anticipation of the tariffs imposed on all steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. Layoffs also began this week at Iveco Rolling Mills, a steel plant outside of Ottawa. National Director for Canada at United Steelworkers said that the fear is palpable among the union's members. And I think that it's notable that, whether or not business actions really truly are being taken because of the trade war, it's most certainly, to your point, an easy thing to blame in this situation. It just, it's obscuring everything around it. And so I don't, that helps no one. It certainly doesn't help U.S.-Canada trade relations.
No.
And it's really hard to tell a business's true intentions, but it's easy to make assumptions. And so, again, as we've talked about before, the threat of tariffs alone has proven to be enough to cause some of the drama that you've been seeing play out in the markets, in the workforce, in the business setting. And I think that's why you're seeing companies that were starting to actually slow down in certain sectors before any of this even rolled out. So maybe Canadian firms have the jitters. That's what it seems like. But does it matter why? Because the impacts are the same, and that's going to be a strain on manufacturing growth. So
well, and Jeff mentioned that if we ran this story 6 months ago, people would be like, "Hey, great." I mean, I don't think if this story runs any other time than now, there's no chance it's in the top 5.
Right.
It's a very compelling story just because it is a part of that evolving trade war. But I think before we run it in one of our newsletters and they're just like, great. What a positive development. On to other business. All right. Our next most popular story. World's largest tire manufacturer turns to recycled materials. Can you guess the world's largest tire manufacturer? I'll give you a minute. Did you know that Lego is the world's largest tire maker? Of course, we are talking volume, not size here. For nearly 20 years, Lego has made 306 million rubber tires annually. The company actually hit 381 million tires in 2010. Michelin, on the other hand, only made a measly 200 million tires last year. Missing by a wide margin. Sustainability goals are persistently top of mind for Lego, which is why the Danish toy giant said it's turning to recycled materials for tire production. The company is going to use material created from old ropes and nets from ocean vessels, combined with recycled engine oil. Lego said the new material will first show up in 7 of its different tire pieces, with each containing at least 30% recycled material. The recycled material tires have already shown up in products, and the company said it expects them to be used in about 120 different sets by the end of 2025. Anna, Lego has been pretty tireless when it comes to sustainability initiatives. It's kind of good to see that they finally nailed one.
Yeah, I mean, when the rubber meets the road, Lego is there when it comes to sustainability.
I think that, this one's really just a good fit.
Yeah. When I first read this story, I was kind of like, oh, that's very cute. Lego is makes the most tires, but they don't have to drive on roads and they're very small. So a
few less regulatory hurdles.
Right. The context is very important in this situation. So does this type of effort translate into tires that actually drive? Could this be a thing that leads to the thing? Right. But looking back on a story we covered a couple years ago, in 2023, Bridgestone unveiled a formula that used 37% recycled and 38% renewable materials for a total of 75%. They say this includes synthetic rubber that was made with recycled plastics and natural rubber that we talked about on the podcast many moons ago.
The cactus, right?
The cactus, yeah. It's harvested from desert shrubs. They're grown domestically in Arizona. And Bridgestone at the time also announced that it was pursuing a tire design utilizing 90% recycled and renewable materials for passenger cars. So real actual tires.
Yeah.
Not just in my living room, but on the highway. And, we've talked about some of these developments in the past, and I think it's important to point out just how much effort and investment has gone into removing rubber from the supply chain because it's a highly variable material based on where it's grown and how it's impacted by the weather. And I think tire makers have been brewing ideas for a while here on ways that they can remove that from their formulas. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that they are an industry that's almost ahead of the curve in that consideration. I think ultimately we're going to see a lot of different product formulas change based on the need to address climate change related adjustments that will need to be made in terms of sourcing, not just materials, but locations, and geopolitical tensions and tariffs and all that stuff that factors in. But whatever the results are challenges to getting those materials. And you're seeing the tire industry be really way ahead, I think, on solving some of those problems, which is pretty cool. I think that as a inspiration to other industries, maybe they could look at. It sounds like the most boring industry that you can think of. Look at tires, man.
Yeah. Well, big tire.
Big tire.
But no, I think it's a good reminder that every industry is looking for this to make sense economically and from a sustainability. And I think that not just tire companies, but I also think Lego is a really good example of, really wanting those ESG goals to hit and just striking out a lot before something works. I mean, Jeff, a year or two ago, there was the huge recycled plastic bottle failure where they were going to make all the bricks from recycled plastics, and it just didn't work. It was hard for me. I was trying to think of a company that has worked harder towards sustainability goals and without walking away, right? They've had all these different, and there are a couple of examples of ones that have hit, but putting in real millions of development dollars into it just to be they just don't stick together the right way.
But did you at least appreciate the fact that they were very straightforward about that? And they said hey, this isn't working. We got to try something else. Because I think a lot of companies, they would put out the press release, here's what we're going to do, and then assume that everyone forgets about it.
Yeah. Oh, completely agree. But I think that's why it shows that Lego's really committed to actually doing it right. Because, they're not afraid to be we tore apart a lot of plastic bottles, and man,
what a disaster.
Did not work. We have so much equipment we can't get rid of. Jeff, your thoughts on Lego making new tires?
Well, in addition to the tires, they're really instituting this desire to use recycled materials throughout all of their products, which I think is incredibly impressive when you look at their performance. They just put out, their 2024 financials. Revenue is up 13%, sales were up 12%, market share grew, operating profit up 10%, free cash flow grew 24%. All of these positive numbers. This is a company did $10 billion in sales last year. Sure. That's incredible, especially when you consider that some of these materials that they're sourcing now can cost upwards of 70% more than what they were using previously. So they've been able to absorb and pass along a lot of these costs, and the consumers are cool with it, okay? Especially when you look at Legos, there's a lot of ripoffs out there that just don't come close, and they're a lot less expensive, though. There are other options out there. So Lego has been able to sort of wrap this sustainability pitch into their brand and their culture, and consumers are good with it because there's Lego stores, there's Lego movies, obviously. They just leverage their brand so effectively and translate that into a higher value product. Then when you go to the store, it's extremely impressive. And then the way that they're able to, again, this is something that's so important to them with the sustainability and the recycled materials. It's not something that they do. It's just part of their company. It's embraced and embedded in everything that they do. They didn't go halfway with it. I think that's the biggest lesson here. If you're going to do it, go all the way with it and continue to work with your brand and leverage that power that it has in the marketplace. Lego's a perfect case study in all those things.
Well, and it seems like anytime you go to a store, Lego's footprint and shelf space has expanded.
Yep.
It's incredible. And to your point, Jeff, we did receive some knockoff Legos for Christmas. And, maybe, let's just say hopefully they were made poorly, sustainably, but they look like they were made cheaply, unsustainably. And, I'm trying to put together this G.I. Joe tank, and, some of the pieces still have flash on them. They don't click together the right way. They're all falling apart. And I have never been so frustrated. And I guess the fact that we've covered how careful Lego has been with that IP and that click, I just it was going over and over in my head, and I'm like, these people just don't care about proper design. This is a money grab. It's frustrating.
Well, it's impressive too. Lego has basically become the next generation's jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
Really, my kids still put them together because they're these intricate, complex 2,000-piece Star Destroyer from Star Wars that they'll sit and put together because it's essentially like working a 3D puzzle. It's incredible, and the detail once they get it together and everything else, it's a sculpture. Basically. So it's the way that they've embraced all these different tiers, I guess, in terms of their customers, and they're doing it through a quality product, not trying to. I'm sure there are people at Lego who are like, we could do this so much more cost effectively. And they don't budge.
You had mentioned it, so I just want to run down a couple other sustainability initiatives. Since 2018, the company has used a plastic made from Brazilian sugarcane to make minifig accessories and botanical pieces. Last year, Lego started incorporating material derived from artificial marble into transparent pieces like windows and lightsabers. Lego has also worked with its peers to buy e-methanol, a material produced by blending renewable energy with CO2 from bio-waste, which it's going to use in certain parts in the future. So starting to have a couple of wins when it comes to sustainability. All right, our most popular story this week. Ford shows off treasure trove of rarely seen vehicles. Ford Motor is looking forward by looking back. The car maker recently invited a select few to check out a few rarely seen Ford vehicles at its headquarters in Michigan. The company's heritage fleet had some 50 cars and trucks on display in Dearborn. Ford has similar fleets in the UK, Germany, and Australia. About a year ago, company CEO Jim Farley asked Ted Ryan, Ford's heritage brand manager, to curate a US-based collection. This American fleet now has 175 vehicles in it. Some highlights include a series of Mustang performance vehicles, a 1938 V8 ambulance, and a 2003 Model T 100 that's a replica of the 1914 Model T. Ryan told the AP it's not just the wow factor that brings these cars to light. He says, quote, "These vehicles have a business purpose. They're used by engineers. They're used by our product development team. They're used by our communications group, and every one of them has to have a reason that drives the business forward." And this kind of serves as a reminder that it's a good thing to learn from the past without living in it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I thought it was a fun review of some of Ford's more exciting product unveilings over the last century. And to me, I thought what was notable was it comes at a really interesting time for Ford, where CEO Jim Farley said, I think at the beginning of last year, that the company was done making boring products. Mm-hmm. And he's repeated that a couple of times since. That statement really stuck with me because Ford, and I think all of automotive really, are in this they're at like a unique crossroads when it comes to technology shifts and themes around sustainability and whatever the next phase of the auto industry will be. And so the companies at the center of this are being forced to develop products before there is necessarily widespread consumer acceptance or adoption of those technologies. Like we saw that and are maybe still seeing it a bit with EVs, but also I think more importantly is with autonomous technology, something that every major auto company has a hand in developing, yet there's still a lot of hesitation from the market in terms of how far that should go or what it should entail. So I think it's a good reminder of how these firms, they have to be ahead of the curve. They're placing a lot of eggs in many different baskets in pioneering some of those technologies. And that's exciting. At the same time, I discourage these companies, I think, from getting so wrapped up in what's new and different that they lose sight of what's core to the business. And things like reliability and consistency, arguably that is why people buy a Ford. Mm-hmm. So I think, and we're seeing companies like we covered last week or the week before, Volkswagen kind of walking back in areas where they think they kind of maybe overdid it.
The buttons.
Swapping out the physical buttons for touch screens and voice commands. Like in this case, I think consumers showed that they very much want these boring features, but more traditional features. And I think it's important that auto balances that. And it'll be interesting to see what Ford does going forward if they really stick to this. We don't make boring products to the detriment of the brand, or if it's more of a balanced approach.
Well, and I think, and we can get into it a little bit too, what the future of Ford looks like, I guess, under the hood. Just NVIDIA had its huge conference this week, and there are a lot of incredible things coming out when it comes to AI, as well as how Ford might be using that when it comes to product design. But Jeff, when you look at some of these models that they were showing off, do you think that it's good to keep this heritage fleet so they kind of know where they came from, how they've evolved, and how they will continue to do that going forward?
I think it's hugely important. I think more companies should do this. It doesn't matter what your product is. If it's something as, maybe more cooler or exciting as vehicles, or if you're making leaf springs, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think keeping this legacy dynamic of your products easily accessible and viewable or visible is incredibly important, not only for sort of the culture and legacy of your company, but looking at these past products, and what Anna kind of alluded to is understanding not just, hey, we put out this crazy Gulfstream concept in whatever year it was, 1998, but also why did we do that?
Yeah.
What were we looking at? What were we listening to? What were our customers telling us at this time, and how did we respond to it? I think that's the biggest takeaways you can have from anything of a historical nature. I'm kind of a history nerd, so maybe I'm a little bit more passionate about it, but looking at this one, the one that caught my eye was the 2000 Ford Ranger EV. So we get all excited about this F-150 Lightning. They had an EV truck in 2000. Why didn't it go anywhere? Was it because of engineering? Was it customer demand? What was the dynamic there? What was in play? So I think there is a tremendous amount of takeaway here, not just for Ford, but for anybody who wants to go through and take a look at these or has the opportunity to. And I'd encourage other companies to do this type of thing as well.
Well, we've been to a lot of those companies. We've been in those lobbies. Do any come to the top of mind? Like, as to the first time you looked at it and you were just, for me, it was, I remember being in the lobby and just being like, that is a lot of casters. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Look at how they've evolved. And those are all different? Yep, they are. And so, but it was cool actually to kind of, after like joking around, just like kind of dig into the past and like the internals of the caster and how they had changed. But can you guys think of any, like, just off the top of the head, where all of a sudden you're like, what's in that case? And you go and it's the evolution of these tiny plastic components that are in body, medical devices.
A lot of hand tool companies.
Yeah.
When I was in the automotive side, they would have some interesting stuff in there. Whether it's their entryway or, up and down the hallways and stuff like that, you could see some pretty interesting evolutions, even if you're just looking at a crescent wrench, you know, and what it used to look like and what it's like now and the pride that there is in all of those different engineering developments. So absolutely.
Yeah. True. When we visited Boker's for, I believe, an episode of Made in America, and they had the entire history of washers. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, I am legitimately interested right now.
Yeah.
DigiKey has it in a big display of, going back to when their facility was a garage. I don't know. I get into that stuff.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, and because we're out of time, we won't get into the future, but basically, Ford is getting big into AI, and they're going to do that in product development, so you should look that up. All right. Now, before we jump into, in case you missed it, we have another word from our sponsor. Reimagine what your data can do with Kaufman Rossin by turning your information into insights. Your data holds endless possibilities, but only if you know how to unlock them. By turning raw information into actionable strategies, you can uncover opportunities, tackle challenges, and move your business forward. With Kaufman Rossin as your partner, clarity replaces complexity, giving you the insights you need to shape a smarter, brighter future. Learn more about our digital transformation services at kaufmanrossin.com/transform. Check out the link in the body copy, also in the live chat. Go check it out, see what you think. All right, in case you missed it, the story is maybe not as popular, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'll go first this week. And before I jump into mine, like the one I was going to pick was basically a one-sentence update. So I was just basically going to provide that. We did the story on Moosehead Brewery's 1,400 beer presidential pack or whatever. Well, I interviewed the company, and they have a wait list of more than 200 of those presidential packs. Mm-hmm. They made 3. And they sold out. The first one sold in like 11 minutes. They made 3, then those sold out. They made 5, those sold out. And then they were like, okay, we'll make 10. And those sold out. And so they have more than 190 of these presidential packs still on a wait list. And they just need to figure out if they can and how they will make more of them. So like one of those really cool success stories / when something goes viral, just like, whew, mm-hmm. How are we going to adjust to make this happen? So
yeah,
difficult story.
Yeah.
Good story. All right. But this week, I chose a story about how manufacturing and supply chain leaders are concerned about current trade policies. Digital manufacturing platform Fictive announced the results from its 10th annual State of Manufacturing and Supply Chain report. The company surveyed 254 senior manufacturing and supply chain leaders. According to the report, 96% of respondents have concerns over the impact that President Donald Trump's trade policies will have on supply chains. Chief among them is the potential toll tariffs will have on costs and profitability, followed by the administration's renewed emphasis on bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. Manufacturing leaders are also fearful that tariffs will drive business uncertainty and impact efforts to prioritize nearshoring. Only 4% of professionals surveyed said they had no concerns about these policies, and 93% think trade wars will likely escalate in the next few years. Now, I chose this story just because, given all the conversations I have had with multiple people in the industry, it was a good reminder that everything you're thinking, everyone else is thinking. And, you're not alone. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and everyone's trying to figure out what to prioritize and how to adjust accordingly. From this survey, about 68% of leaders say they are prioritizing onshoring in 2025, especially for markets that require complex parts at scale, medical technology, EVs, clean energy. 77% of manufacturing leaders say a lack of resources, mostly labor and money, is going to limit their impact to manage these supply chains effectively, but still they're working on it. And while they work on that, sustainability remains top of mind, as 95% of professionals say that weather and extreme climate events will impact their supply chain strategy this year. Nearly 95% of industry pros also say that they use AI for manufacturing and supply chain operations, including inventory management and product design. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to check out this story, but I don't know. I know that that was a lot of facts coming out pretty hot. But I don't know. I think that sometimes it's good to see, basically get the pulse of more than 250 leaders in manufacturing and the supply chain, see what they're thinking, and then know that, hey, everyone's working with the same variables that are keeping people on their toes.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too surprising here.
Yeah,
I think that
the 4%
it definitely
was kind of surprising. No.
It definitely echoes the sentiment that we hear in a lot of different cases, and that's just we just need clarity here. Mm-hmm. I think some of the talk on reshoring is a bit rosy. I think that it's something that people want to do, but the practicality of it is challenged because we still have a huge skills gap concern. Yeah. We have more jobs in manufacturing than we have people interested in getting into them. So that right there is going to put some of those reshoring initiatives, it's going to make it much, much more difficult. Yeah. We also have a training issue in terms of getting a lot of these folks up to speed for a lot of the jobs that we want to reshore. That's going to, one of the stories I'm going to bring up here in a minute talks to that in a little bit more depth. So I think when we do look at this, yes, it's good to know we're all sort of in the same boat. There is some definite strength in numbers philosophy there, but I think it also illustrates that we just need clarity. Mm-hmm. Whatever we're going to do, there's no one who would say that there is not an issue with a trade imbalance, okay? We get that. But we think, as we've discussed here before, we probably need to be a little bit more surgical with it than the approach that's being taken right now, because it not only puts everybody on edge, but there's just so much uncertainty that people are paralyzed to make decisions. And then potentially they do things that they're going to regret later on, whether it's job cuts, price hikes, whatever the case may be, or an inability to make some of these investments. The thing that caught my eye was the number that are using AI in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. I guarantee you all of them would like to make some additional investment there if they could. They don't know if they can.
Yeah. No, more than half say that AI is going to be a leading trend shaping their strategy this year. And I think that's because they see that playing a big role in the labor crisis, in training, and it being really useful there. Anna, especially coming off of news of the biggest day of deregulation or whatever they called gutting the EPA, that still 95% of these professionals say that they are remaining committed to their sustainability goals. And if anything, they face challenges. No, it was like 95% are committed, and like more than 90% of them have leadership in place to make sure they follow through on those. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a bright spot as well.
I think luckily sustainability has had a bit of a head start to this moment in time. And so over time, folks have determined that some of the things that they're doing actually make a lot of financial sense. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, those campaigns, I could see them being very robust for these companies. And, why turn back now on that stuff if it's working for you? So That was a relief to see. I agree that it was like, that's not a huge surprise that people are nervous about this stuff. I think, as Jeff said, the rosy outlook on reshoring is maybe a glass half full. I think the challenge here is like when you have a market that's flooded with tariff impacted products whose price has gone up, the fact of the matter is that those replacement products that are produced here will also go up in price.
Yeah.
So that will impact those businesses as well, no matter what, even if they're producing them here, because they can only sell as many products as consumers will buy. And if they're too expensive, they won't buy them.
Right.
So there's a lot to unpack in terms of like how this is actually going to impact these businesses.
Anna, what's your in case you missed it this week?
Oh, well. Let me pull that up here. So I also picked a story about, global trade implications, basically. But like, I don't know if you guys have noticed that's all anyone is talking about now. So we are covering it a lot. Every day we're like, well, tariff day again.
Yeah,
like,
the first half of the newsletter, supply chain.
Yeah. So also we've been discussing, of course, the boycotts of U.S. products that we've seen originating in Canada. Well, according to this report that I read this week on IN.com about Danes boycotting U.S. goods, there's a movement that's also spreading across Europe, according to this report. The article starts by interviewing a Dane who is, quote, furious about Trump's rhetoric around Greenland and says boycotting American products is the only way he knows how to protest the president. People are joining Facebook groups where they exchange ideas about how to avoid U.S. products and find alternatives. Feelings are said to be especially strong across the Nordic region and very possibly strongest in Denmark, given Trump's threats to seize Greenland through, whatever way.
Yeah.
The article does note that the sentiment is spreading across Europe. I know that's very hard to capture sentiment. And so I don't know how impactful this will be, how long it would take for an effort like this to be actually reflected in sales figures for American companies. But it is already happening to Tesla. And I think the early documented declines of Tesla sales might actually embolden some of these foreign consumers to keep going because they can see that that's been effective there. And if it truly takes hold, then I think some American companies and industries specifically that export a lot of their products, they're going to be in for a real wild ride.
Yeah.
And, as we discussed last week on the podcast, I think sometimes just that anti-American sentiment is much, much worse than a tariff because individual companies can they can't really do anything about that. It's really hard to insulate themselves from a boycott or do anything about what the president is saying day to day. They don't really have a lot of, that they have ways to respond to that. So it's a challenging situation to be in when your buyers in a foreign country are angry with you.
Yeah. Well, and we've seen it already with bourbon makers kind of coming out and just saying like, hey, this is going to be really bad. And it's kind of weird that bourbon is like the first thing people think about when they're like, no more American products, cut bourbon. Now let's see what else we can cut. And also I do think that this is a really good way to protest and, try and make some change, but also let's just stop buying things. Maybe let's stop setting them on fire too. Like
I think we can stop setting things on fire.
I think we could do less.
That one doesn't work for me.
Cocktails, But Jeff, do you agree? Do you think boycotts like this have a chance to make real change?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not even just about limiting sales right now. It's about basically taking growth off the table. If all of these markets are saying no, how do you grow?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to jack up your prices in those markets that you already have a presence in. Consumers lose. So yeah, we have to take these things seriously. You talk about bourbon a couple different times. I think that's because that's American bourbon.
Yeah.
Like that is a brand. That's something people recognize.
Yeah.
If you start, exporting American cheese, it's just not going to have the same impact, on the consumers in different countries.
Yeah.
So that's why bourbon or any of those types of spirits sort of get the attention first. But we're going to feel it in other areas too here. I think the world is going to wake up to how much how much they rely on America for some of these different products
Yeah.
to get to market. And if they start looking more locally as opposed to globally and sourcing them, and if they're already realizing price increases, I mean, Europe is going to feel this stuff too with all the tariff talk that's been going on. So yeah, we do need to pay attention to this stuff. We need to pay attention to the companies when they start saying, hey man, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to a lot of that clarity that we need to know, why are we doing this? What's the long-term benefit here? Because if it's just about reshoring, that's not going to work in a lot of these places.
Yeah.
So we need to know all parts of the plan here.
Yeah. What's your in case you missed it this week?
So I picked an article, sort of supply chain focused, but just kind of more, it does fit in some of those topics. But the one that was talking about the push to restore semiconductor manufacturing faces a labor crisis. And the article does a really nice job of setting up sort of the history of going back to COVID a little bit and talking about how we realize we have this chip shortage. It's an issue, the things that went into the CHIPS Act in terms of getting a lot of those monies available for manufacturing to come here from different, as opposed to primarily Asia. And one of the things that the author brings up, though, is the push to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S. faces a significant hurdle, and it's a shortage of skilled workers. Semiconductor industry is expected to need 300,000 engineers by 2030 as these new plants are built. So basically, it's not saying we need 300,000 more. We're short of our total here. Yeah. How do we get these folks focused on a manufacturing career? We have people who are studying materials. We have people who are studying microelectronics. How do we get them focused on making chips in these facilities, because we're going to need them here. And it goes on to talk about some of the different things that they're doing at the University of Missouri, where the author is from, in terms of trying to educate students on these opportunities. But whether it's this, whether it's all this other reshoring that we're trying to initiate, there needs to be a plan for getting people motivated to move into these careers and into these jobs, or we're going to have spent all this money and have all these wonderful fabrication plants and nothing coming out of them because we don't have enough people there.
Yeah.
So there has to be this other part of the component. We talk about EVs all the time. In order for the EV thing to work, we're going to have to improve our grid infrastructure. In order for us to become a center of chip manufacturing, we need to address the skills concern, which is a big one right now.
Well, and a part of the skills problem, right, is, and I know we've talked about it previously, but a lot of the economic development contracts that we see come from these sort of like hybrid public-private economic development institutions, is that a lot of it, the investment comes from the company and the state into training a workforce. And, you know, they're getting into schools, starting very young sometimes, just trying to train up a workforce, particularly in the region, but to try and fill some of these jobs.
Yeah. And, you know, I hate to get too dark about it. This podcast, generally speaking, I feel like I have been taking a more negative tack these last few stories. But, you know, you talk about uncertainty right now. What is compelling a young person to look at college when they see, you know, the Department of Education being dismantled, and how do I know what happens to my student loan if I take it out, or funding cuts to research? Like, I think it kind of sets a bad example for kids that are maybe going out into that and trying to understand, like, you know, these universities are facing funding cuts. Where should I be? What should I do? Like, is this a safe path for me to take? You don't want people questioning that, right? So I think, again, clarity. We need to be clear about what's happening, why it's happening, so folks understand that if they want to take a chance on a career path, that it's secure for them.
But hey, if you get into Harvard and your parents make less than like $200,000, it's free. So there's that bright spot. There's like a little one. There's like a tiny little bright spot on like a huge dark cloud in the education department. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's jump into our final thoughts. Anna, do you have a final thought this week?
Yeah, so I will be out next week. I will not be on the podcast panel. It's a spring break week, so we're taking a little mini trip with the family. And I thought you guys would appreciate this, but like the last month or two, my husband and I were like, we kind of set up a little, not like a bribery, but incentive plan for our kids. And we were basically like, okay, guys, we're going on this trip. You know, if you can get up in the morning and get ready and be on time and all that stuff without like any drama, then we'll put money aside each day for you to spend at the hotel arcade, because they love the arcade.
Oh, yeah.
And man, it's not that I didn't think they would do it, but like they have like knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
And
just rolls of quarters.
yeah, it's going to be so expensive to take. I was just like, I mean, I'm glad, but we're going to spend a lot of time in that arcade.
It is, it's great once kids start responding to incentive plans.
For sure.
But then trying to dial it in, just like, I don't pay you per task. Like, you brushed your teeth. All right, that's a long-term investment in yourself, bud. Like, he was just like, I brushed my teeth, I got ready, and I made my bed. So that's like $20, right? I'm like, whoa, it's quarter per, and we're just going to need to start putting them all in one.
Yeah, you gotta dial that back.
But it works.
This is so funny because I can remember you two being like, oh, listen to this guy. And I'd be like, you know why you set the table? Because I paid for the food.
Yeah.
And you two be like, oh, yeah, Mr. Tough Guy over here. Now you're going to be in the exact same boat in about 2 years.
If they don't set the
Sounding
table.
just like me.
If they don't set the table and enjoy the food, I turn it over. Just like.
You are all talk.
No, I do get angry when like you
turn the table over?
I mean, no, because I don't want to buy another table. But I do I just basically sit there and shake as I tremble in anger. And like you can hear the little plates just rattling. But no, like where you make an entire dinner. We were talking about it earlier with producer Eric and his partner's efforts to like just produce the highest quality meals that I've ever seen, just so everyone could be like, I don't like it. And, my kids did the same thing yesterday, and I'm just like, this meal has all the elements you enjoy. Put it in your mouth. Put it in your mouth hole. And they're just like, no, I don't like it. Just like, okay, great. My final thought this week is that, last week my final thought was that we were going to make maple syrup, after tapping trees. And I'm just back here to report that that's hard. And I don't know how maple syrup does not cost $1,000 a bottle. Granted, don't get me wrong, like my brother does it the old school way, out by a fire, and we're boiling it via fire and we're throwing wood in it, and it's he's got a whole setup. It's great. When people drive by, I'm pretty sure they think we're making moonshine. But it was also an incredibly rewarding experience to take the sap from the trees, load it into the pots, and boil it down for the better part of 2 hours, so that way you can move it to boil it down even more, and then filter it, and then boil it a little more, and then have a tiny little
just like
thing of syrup,
like a little silver dollar pancake.
Yeah, and it's like I was already like maple syrup is already expensive, so I was already just like, whoa, easy on the pancakes. Now I'm just gonna be like, do you remember what went into that? But it was an incredible experience, like kind of teaching my kids what kind of hard work goes into making a product, and then actually seeing the fruits of their labor. Plus, all of a sudden, Des got super interested in splitting wood and we taught him how to split wood. And that might have been the highlight of my year so far. It was just like when he split a piece of wood and just like turned to me and he was just like, yeah.
All right.
And it was like, you did it. And now we can split wood together. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So my wife and daughters were gone for a big chunk of the week. They were on their spring break, so they went on kind of a shopping trip type deal. So I didn't, you're talking about making food for everybody and everything. I got to just make stuff for me. Yeah. And it's always the simple stuff. I love sloppy joes. Mm-hmm. Love sloppy. Nobody else does. Yeah. So I was just really happy this week to make some sloppy joes and watch professional wrestling without being teased for it. So my closing thought is just embrace those little things.
Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes a little me time, right?
Yeah.
A little, sloppy joe night.
You just earned yourself a new nickname, Sloppy Joe.
Sloppy Chop. Oh, I don't know if I can get on board with that. I do not think I can get on board
with that.
Guys,
no?
Maybe like if we made a sandwich and called that the Sloppy Jeff.
The Sloppy Jeff.
Like if he had like some sort of homemade sauce that went into his special Sloppy Joe to make a Sloppy Jeff.
It's funny because he's not sloppy. I'm just saying.
Yes. Oh, I get that. Producer Eric wants to remind everybody that Canada's maple syrup reserve, the world's only, is valued at $35 million.
Ooh.
And it holds 6.9 million pounds of syrup. Wow. We were just a drop in that syrup bucket this weekend. But also, I mean, if you have the means and opportunity to do it, it's really worth it. It's doing it at least once. All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. You can email the podcast, reach any of us at Anna, David, or Jeff at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can get it. No, so you can join us live every Thursday. And you can catch us messing things up all the way to the end. All the way to the end, right at the end.
Make sure you stick around.
For Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.